G'day guys, how's it going? My name is CJ. Yes, we've got the OnePlus Nord in the house. Let's get into it.
All right. I'll tell you the truth.
So I've only had this phone for a few days, and I'd just like to give some initial impressions on the device. Now, unless you've been living under a rock over the last couple of weeks, you should know that the OnePlus Nord is pretty much everything you could ask for. At least that's what they say. Realistically though, it's a throwback to the good old days where you could actually buy a really great device for a price that doesn't break the bank. With one caveat though. Currently, it's only being sold in Europe and India for the time being, so there's that to consider. But if you do live in India, it starts at a low 25,000 rupees, landing you an India exclusive model starting at 64 gigs of storage and 6 gigs of RAM. Or if you're in Europe, expect to pay roughly £380 or roughly 410 to 420 euros for slightly better base specs. But for the relatively small amount of money, what do you actually get? Well, let's break down the hard specs. It's got 6.44 inch, 90Hz, 1080p AMOLED display with an underscreen fingerprint sensor. It's got a Snapdragon 765G with 5G support. It's got RAM that ranges from 6 to 12 gigs depending on the market. And like the RAM, it's got slightly slower UFS 2.1 storage that ranges from 64 gigs to 256 gigs, again, depending on the market. It's also got a 4,115 mAh battery with Warp Charge 30T and a mind-boggling 6-lens camera system, 4 on the rear, 2 on the front. Now before we get started, can I also just make a quick shout out to manufacturers like OnePlus to include a simple case and a screen protector pre-installed. Now even if it is on the cheaper side, which I don't subscribe to because actually the OnePlus Nord's included case is actually kind of cool with a unique little pattern on it. It's also got a little port cover as well, which is kind of cool. But it's great to see that even in budget-oriented phones, they can still include a case because that's usually the first thing that they'd skimp on. But it really shows the care they have for the overall user experience. So more points to OnePlus for that. Now the first thing to note is that it feels great in the hand. Even though it's got a plastic frame, it's still a glass sandwich unlike the Pixel 4a, and as a result, it still feels really premium. And that's made even more so thanks to its metal buttons and volume slider, which is still very much OnePlus. And whilst it's not as heavy or solid as flagship OnePlus phones like the 7 or 8 Pro, it still definitely feels nice, and in a weird way, the relative lightness actually helps with fatigue, and it's a much more comfortable phone to use for longer periods of time. And I'm very happy to use it for long periods too, thanks to its really nice, flat, 90Hz fluid AMOLED display. On initial impressions, it looks really nice and it works well outdoors, but I've definitely seen the green and purple tint issues associated with it at the lower brightness. Now OnePlus says there's a fix coming for it through software updates, so hopefully that'll land before the full review. But overall, the 90Hz refresh rate helps make it feel super smooth and quick to use. They talk a lot about the OnePlus experience where combining hardware with Oxygen OS, using the phone is super smooth and quick regardless of what you throw at it. Fortunately, the whole experience is translated well into the Nord, even with its mid-range processor and slower storage. So far, the experience doesn't show any signs that will scream mid-range, and that's awesome. There's nothing worse than seeing jank and lag to sour the overall experience. Of course, this might change when I push it harder with more graphically intense games and apps, but certainly bodes well. Now what's also been quite solid is battery life. Even after just using it for the last few days, so far it's shown pretty great stamina from day-to-day use, and even if it does run down, you've got the Warp charger, so it's great to be able to quickly juice it up just before you leave the house if you've forgotten to charge it overnight. But it does slightly disappoint in the fact that it doesn't have wireless charging. But given where it sits in the market, I think I can forgive it. Now what's also slightly disappointing, at least on initial impressions, is the camera system. It's been marketed as a flagship quality camera where it adopts the 48 megapixel standard camera from the OnePlus 8, but I'm not sure it warrants that hype. And now let's be real, the OnePlus 8's camera was never considered a flagship system anyway. I mean, that's not to say it's bad, just isn't flagship quality and can't really compete with the top dogs like the iPhone 11 or the Pixel. Of course, I'm going to need to do a little bit more testing, but I can say straight away, it's not going to blow anyone's socks away. It's still more than usable, of course. But what surprised me more was actually the selfie cameras, and it's great that they've included a useful ultra-wide angle to the dual system on the front. It's a bit better than including a useless depth sensor like we saw on the Galaxy S10 Plus about a year ago. So I'm going to need a little bit more time to use the cameras to really get to know it and really know if it's any good. But whilst they're not going to blow anyone's mind, for the price where the Nord sits and the category that it finds itself in, it's looking like a really good system, just not a great system. So overall, the OnePlus Nord really looks like it nails a lot of important points for people looking to buy this phone. It doesn't want to compromise in experience. And in areas that they have compromised, they certainly aren't going to make that big of a difference for the people who want this sort of phone. People who are a little bit more budget oriented. Combining with the fact that OnePlus are excellent at maintaining software support for at least a couple of years, but probably longer, this is looking like a real winner and has shades of the iPhone SE in terms of recommendability. Is that even a word? Anyway, it's a phone that looks and feels easy to recommend, if you can get your hands on it. Obviously, it's not sold in a few key markets like here in Australia, in the US, but that's something I'll touch on in my full review in a couple weeks' time. And of course, if there are any specific things that you want me to look at, or phones to compare it to, let me know in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed what you saw, give us a like, subscribe for more, ding the bell icon so you don't miss out on the full review, and thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Say good day to your mum for me. Cheers.